Hi.
Hi Jasmine, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Brilliant. So good to see you.
Yeah, absolutely. How are things?
Things are they're going as well as can be expected with,
Right.
with the lockdown and stuff. But listen, everyone's healthy, everyone's happy, so
Yeah.
good. How are you?
Good. Yeah, same.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah,
know if we're on as severe of a lockdown over here in America yet. It seems like over there in Europe is pretty
yeah.
strict. Yeah.
We we've had a number of lockdowns. The one at the moment is the only shops that are allowed to be open are food and medicine, really,
Yeah.
uh, necessities, and there's a there's a stay at home order as well. So
Right. Oh,
you're,
yeah.
you're allowed out once a day to go do some exercise, but
Right.
maybe a walk in the park or something like that. But
Wow.
yeah,
The
yeah.
order is literally only once a day you're allowed outside?
That
Is that like the guideline or
Yeah. I might have just fibbed to you there because it might be twice now. I think I can't keep up with it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But that's the only reason. And you must stay in your local sort of area as well. You're not allowed to travel or anything. So it's
Right.
been really different. What's the 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 way that America and here in the UK seem to have set up against COVID just seems to be completely different.
Yeah.
Uh, what what's it actually like over there at the moment as far as COVID
Yeah,
related lockdowns and
it's I
stuff?
feel like, I don't know. Definitely state by state, they're responding differently. Here in Pennsylvania, it's like, I don't even know now, like what type of stage that we're in. I know that everywhere across the country, the priority is on getting out the vaccines as quickly as possible. But again, the efficiency of that too varies widely state by state. Ryan, his family, some of his families in Maryland, and they were very swift.
Yeah,
Even I have friends in New York, and it sounds like things are running along fairly smoothly. But here, where I live in Pennsylvania, it's terrible. It just seems like a huge mess. And I think the latest news was Ryan's mother was trying to get an appointment, but they found out that something like 20,000 or 200,000 of the shots that were supposed to be reserved for the second dosage
yeah.
were accidentally given away. And so her appointment had to get canceled. And so it's just such a disorganized mess, which is very frustrating. But as far as right now in my county, there's some restaurants that are opening for dine-in
Yeah.
apparently. Personally, I don't want to take a risk. I've been hospitalized with pneumonia before, and so it's just I'm extra cautious.
Yeah, for sure.
um, yeah, so I've just been staying at home, really grateful that I have like technology and everything to keep me connected. But
Yeah.
yeah.
I think we just reached 20 million vaccines of the first one here in the UK.
Right.
But they do seem to be moving pretty quickly. There's been a lot of things that I've disagreed with the way we've managed it. A lot of things that have been behind 100%.
Yeah.
But the differences, not just between the US and the UK, but just country to country, seems
Yeah.
to be completely different. Uh,
Right.
do you do you have much knowledge on how? I believe South Korea were one of the countries that really locked down quickly and have been quite successful. I keep telling everybody that, and I'm doing my usual. There's no facts behind that. I just probably I think I just heard it somewhere.
No, I believe there are facts that back that. But yeah, it just seems again, I know somebody also in Korea, and the restaurants over there seem to be opening up for some dine-in as well.
Okay.
And in Korea too, I mean, I think it varies from state to state and country to country because of infrastructure too,
Yeah.
and culture. And in Korea, everyone's got this collective mindset where they're willing to share, like, well, I don't know how willing they are, but I think everyone's data and location is far more tracked.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
in this purpose, it's for a good purpose, I think, as far as taking control of the virus. and that's led to, I think, quicker, pathways to freedom for them as far as
Yeah.
mobility and all that. But yeah, I don't know.
It's one of the things that I've actually had thoughts on regarding the US is that there seems to be a people want to hold on to their freedoms, which means that it's taking longer to get out the other end, if that makes sense. Whereas I think even in the UK, we were more open to the idea of locking down, closing everything. Now, it didn't actually work out as well as what we hoped, but
Yeah.
we wanted to lock down with the hope that we would open up sooner, and that hasn't actually totally happened. But
Uh,
yeah, as you say, every country just seems to be coping differently, I think.
right. And yeah, I'm hoping. I don't know. I don't know what it's like over there because I keep hearing about these new variants
Yeah,
that are making it just spread more quickly, and just it's I don't know. So that's really quite terrifying.
yeah,
But I don't know if the variants have come to America yet.
okay,
So we'll see. I think I heard in the news on NPR though recently, just a couple days ago, how there is a new surge that's a little bit concerning, but overall the message seems hopeful.
good,
Yeah, so
good, good. Do you know, Jasmine? We'll just keep rolling today,
yeah.
actually, because well, I'm absolutely thrilled to have you on, and when your calendar, I always look at you and think, how does this girl keep doing what she's doing? Uh, but when your calendar became open and we managed to do this so quickly, I was really really chuffed. So first of all, thank you, because it's a treat to have you on. It really is.
Oh, thank you. It's a treat for me to be on. So
So hopefully we'll have and there's no hopeful about it. We'll have a brilliant
yeah.
conversation. I want to start in there's lots of positive things, but I do want to start on something that might be, well, it's not negative. It is what it is, I guess. But what's it been like in the last couple of months in the States? We seem to have more of an interest sometimes in US politics than
Oh,
what we do in our own politics. Not for everybody, not for everybody, but it's definitely been a, the last. In fact, I was going to say the last couple of months, but it's been for much longer than that. Quite a divisive and situation. So, as someone who's in the States at the moment, what's it been like?
oh boy. Very compounded layers of stress and anxiety, especially for being the face of someone who is quite targeted right now, unfortunately.
Yeah,
Although anti-Asian and anti-Asian American violence is definitely not new, but for sure to see this rise in reports, especially all over my feed. Particularly of our elders being attacked, has been very very upsetting. I've talked about this before elsewhere, where we just had 80-year-old men being pushed down randomly, and a 90-year-old man. And so I think the most recent case was of the 84-year-old grandfather from Thailand, and he was just randomly attacked, completely unprovoked, and that led him to his death. And my father is just 80 now. So,
yeah,
nobody really thinks of Grandmaster Cho as a grandfather, but to me, he's still my dad,
yeah.
and I would still be concerned if someone were to knock down my dad, like out of nowhere, and
Yeah.
that's still a possibility. It doesn't matter if he's a grandmaster to
I'd
me
like to
as
see
a
them try.
daughter. Yeah. So it's just, it hits so close to home, and it's very, I don't know. I think everyone's still very much on edge. And again, like we briefly talked about the pandemic and how it's going, and how there's a sense of hopefulness as well. And I think it's the same with all of this, everything going on, with all the multiple layers, because just before our inauguration, we had the insurrection, and so it's just, that was a matter of just a couple of weeks, and it's just quite traumatizing, really. You watch this footage of everything happening at our nation's capital, and then just a couple weeks later, you see the poet Amanda Gorman just speaking such powerful words through her poetry, and just it's just like, oh my gosh, you're writing this in like crazy roller coaster. So I don't know how I can speak for the whole country, but like for me, that's how it's felt, just personally, just such a severe up and down, and trying my best to be as stable as possible. But yeah, I mean, even just a few weeks ago for me personally, it's just life is very different. Again, because of COVID, but also specifically the anti-Asian racism and the spike in it. I don't know if you know this, but Pittsburgh was recently named by the FBI as one of the hubs of white supremacist terrorist groups.
Yeah.
So that's not comforting at all for me to hear. But yeah, so because of that, like I bake and all of that, and I was looking into a potential turnkey commercial kitchen space, which was quite exciting. But ultimately, I didn't feel safe because that neighborhood is just very dominantly white, and so it unfortunately was a decision that I had to make based on that. And so yeah, it's difficult times, but yeah, in some ways I say, the racism is nothing new.
Mhm.
But then I think about, like, I just had a nephew who was
Yeah.
born, and
Yeah.
for our younger generations, this is new to them, in a different way. And so yeah, it's a lot. It's a
Yeah.
lot to
It's,
navigate.
this might be an obvious or a silly question, but just so we're absolutely clear,
Mhm.
do, do you think, or is this spike in anti-Asian violence or violence towards all of the Asian communities directly linked, do you think, to COVID? Is that what?
Well, I don't know if it's linked specifically to COVID, but the rhetoric that was
Yeah,
spread,
yeah,
about it. Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, we had a president who was naming it the Kung flu and
yeah.
continued to label it as the China virus. And, there are people who argue it's like, oh, that's where it came from, but it was done. You know that the intention was not regional. It was to blame and to target. And yeah, unfortunately, again, like talking about history of racism, I also don't know if you know this about American history, but one of the largest mass lynchings was of 18 Chinese immigrants. It was the Asian
I didn't know
population
that. Yeah.
targeted. Yeah, back in 1871. So yeah, it's just I feel that the Asian immigrant population is a common scapegoat
Mhm.
for tensions that happen, whether they are interracial tensions, between the Black and white community. We're kind of wedged in the middle, or economic reasons, where like back, in American history, when like say in the 60s or so, where, or was it in the 80s, 70s, 80s, around there, when
Yep, yep,
the Japanese car industry, it was like kind of seen as taking away American jobs. And so
yep, yep.
we had this killing of Vincent Chen, who was actually a Chinese American, but was targeted as somebody misunderstood as being Japanese and taking jobs away. And he's just a human being. We're all just human
Yep,
beings.
yep.
Unfortunately, we're being forced with this blame. And yeah, I definitely think that there's a correlation that can be found
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah.
I, and again, maybe this is something we can talk about later, but uh, having known you and doing a wee bit of research this weekend leading up to the sort of conversation today, rewatching your TED talk, which hopefully we can chat about as well, which was really cool. But I kind of grew up suffering quite a bit of racism as well, and my father's Tunisian, so North African, a North
Mhm.
African Muslim, and then my mum was a white Scott. And after 9/11, and I know we're going back quite a bit there, but the anti-Islamic rhetoric really, and then the violence that then
Right.
created, I can definitely see a comparison there. between people saying it's, and again, I'm sitting here speaking to someone whose parents are Korean. They're not even Chinese. And as you described the gentleman from Thailand or Vietnam or any of these countries, it, people just see someone of Asian descent or someone who looks or might look from an Islamic or Arab descent, and then you're a target straight away. I definitely felt that myself.
Yeah, I think it's, I said we are all human beings, but sometimes we operate from our lowest selves, I guess,
Yeah,
when we
yeah.
get into that group and gang mentality. And it's just, that's why all my work is about encouraging people to pause, because I think that pause is so important. Like, that's one really positive thing about this pandemic, is it's forcing a lot of people to pause against their will, unfortunately. So there are people fighting the pause, but that slowing down, at least, I think, helps us to humanize one another, and just get into our higher selves.
Yeah.
Like, even like road rage, you think about it, you would never act that way to a person face to face, but when you're
No,
in a car and there's no human face to read, then you get so angry and
yeah.
becomes completely depersonalized. So yeah.
So, social media is very similar, actually. And again, that can fit into people who might be being discriminatory against Asians or against Muslims.
Mhm.
If they were standing in front of you, even the way we're talking now, where we can see each other,
Right.
that's completely different from typing out a vicious message on Twitter or on
Yeah.
Facebook or whatever. It's,
Yes.
yeah. Right. So anyway, that's quite a negative start to the conversation, but there's so much nice, good stuff we can talk about. Uh, I'm going to do what I always do, Jasmine, unfortunately, and jump about a lot, but you'll keep up with me for sure. Uh, let me ask one question, and I'm sure this will open up many others. What is cookie activism?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
let's start on more positive stuff.
Right. So, I mean, I believe everybody has a platform, and mine just turned out to be cookies.
Okay.
But to me, cookie activism is really just one iteration of, small acts of creativity making a very big change. And yeah, I just talked about how the work that I do is really focused on encouraging people to pause. And I don't know a better source than cookies that are as disarming and cause people to, like, take notice. And so that's been, yeah, just kind of a happy, sort of serendipitous accident that happened, where I had started my own online bakery, and then when somebody asked me to put their face on a cookie, they kind of went viral, and I was like, oh, people really pay attention to these. Like, I feel like I got something here. So that's really just how I very organically came up with the idea of, well, if people are going to be looking at my face cookies anyways, then let me put the faces of people who I wish I saw more represented in media, but also the people who I wished I learned about while growing up in this country, like all the people who are missing from my textbooks. So that is basically it. I'm just teaching through a very attractive, disarming medium. And yeah, so that's what cookie activism is.
Let's go back then to uh, you didn't grow up thinking I'm going to become. Maybe you did think about the bakery and that
Right.
more commercial side of it, possibly, but you never thought to yourself, surely, as a 16 and 17-year-old, I'm going to become a cookie activist. So
Right. Yeah.
let's take a couple of steps back and share your story of how you first started baking and then how that then grew to what it is today.
Yeah, so this is a story I love to share about my dad that people don't know as much, this side of him. But I tell everybody that not every home grows up with a positive relationship with sugar, and treats and all that. But our family did. I mean, my dad and my brother, we all have a sweet tooth as well, really bad one. But um, yeah, so like treats and cake and all this stuff was always treated as what it was meant to be, which is celebratory and a treat. And so that included one time when I was a kid and I was really sick with a very high fever. And my dad came home that day with like 5 pints tons of ice cream and like an ice cream cake and ice cream pie. It was just like this huge, bag of treats. And so, like that really defined my whole relationship to dessert and like always being very positive. And so it started with a love of consuming
Yeah.
the baked goods first. And so I naturally had an interest in wanting to learn how to make these delicious desserts. And I first learned in high school from a best friend at the time. And that started my whole passion for it. Like she kind of demystified the whole baking process for me. And I was like, oh, this is amazing. Like I could create these treats that I love to eat, but the greater joy was in me like giving them away. And
Yeah.
so all of that, yeah, from high school is when I always started dreaming, oh, I'd love to own my own bakery one day. And that's kind of where it led to. Yeah.
So I remember, I can't remember what video it was I was watching just this morning actually, and you were talking about when you started creating the t-shirts. Uh,
Oh, yeah, yeah, uh-huh.
I actually couldn't find mine because I was going to wear it today, which was really good. But that's when I might be wrong. You can clarify, but you you started to really express yourself and express where you wanted your this passion to go. Then when it,
Yeah,
it became more than just baking, but to get a message out. So
right.
tell us a wee bit about that. How did you go from uh, starting up the company in the first place to then it morphing into what it is today? Uh,
Right. So, yeah, it's so funny. Yeah, you're like one of my first t-shirt customers.
yeah.
Yeah, so Yummyholic initially started more as like an apparel bakery, and that was really more because of logistics. Also, I didn't have access to my own commercial kitchen space at the time, and so I wasn't really allowed to be baking as a business. So, when I first thought of Yummyholic, that was the whole idea of Yummyholic was actually inspired by my time in a program called AmeriCorps. AmeriCorps is kind of like the Peace Corps within the country,
All right.
and
Okay. Yep.
yeah, for America. And so there was, well, within the program, it was specifically a program called Public Allies Pittsburgh. I was here in the city, and one of their core values was about focusing on assets. And in a community sense, that meant instead of trying to go in and try to create something new to help a community, aka gentrify, you should try to just identify what assets are already existing within a community and amplify them. So I really applied that concept to myself and thought, what skills, what passions and interests are already within me that I could maybe amplify. And that brought me back to like the whole my passions for pastry, but I also had a very strong passion for social justice and all of this. So when I first started Yummyholic, I actually already had this in mind of how can I combine baking with social justice. It was like one of my very first questions from the very beginning. And initially it was through a charitable partnership with a local nonprofit called Beverly's Birthdays. So my goal was to continue trying to regularly bake for them. And that nonprofit basically provides, birthday celebrations
Yep.
and all this for children who are homeless or experiencing homelessness. So that was how it initially began. And yeah, and then again, then it like just gradually led into the cookie activism only about not even a full year after, because I started in the fall of 2015, officially like relaunched it as a bakery once I could bake, and then it happened in the summer of 2016 or so, the whole cookie activism thing.
Well, let's stay on this and something else because the two main areas that I'm interested in most regarding, well, actually, I'm really interested in the cookies, but over and above the cookies, uh, I want I would love you to describe the journey to how you use your cookies for social justice and to raise awareness. The other
Mhm.
thing that really interested me was I heard you speaking about, and it's on your website as well. There's a section on using the cookies to help mental health problems.
Oh, right.
Uh,
Yes.
so either one, you can choose which one we discuss first. But I really
Right.
want to get that message out because I think that's one of the or two of the most amazing things that you're doing. at the moment through Yummyholic?
Yeah. So again, I don't know if there's too much more to add other than that the cookie activism part is sort of how I've used cookies towards social justice, and the aspect of social justice that I'm most working toward currently is representation. Again, I think the lack, people like to say ignorance is bliss, but I think ignorance is very dangerous. And so the lack of awareness when it comes to Asian Americans and their place in American history, if that is completely absent, then that makes us seem very irrelevant and invisible from the fabric of this country. Whereas what I told you, as far back as the 1800s, the first Chinese Americans came, and actually you go further back, the first Filipino immigrants had, or rather, they jumped off slave ships to like build a colony in Louisiana. So we were here even before the Revolutionary War. But we're never really taught this in our curriculum here growing up. Yeah, so that's so from the
Why
UK.
do you think that is? Why do you think that is? What? Why?
Yeah, you just look at who writes the history books. All the focus is completely on white men. It's very Eurocentric. You don't really get much of the Eastern story at all. And yeah, I think it's who has had the power in wielding the pen of history books up to this point. I think that's the reason mainly. And so yes, again, like using cookies is just another way of getting people to pay attention, in a very unexpected type of way. And yeah, I mean, the impacts of it has been quite beyond what I could have ever imagined. I've started, especially after the TED Talk too. I was hearing from people all around the world, even though I was focusing on the Asian American experience, but people over around the world who have felt underrepresented or also misrepresented, really connected with what I'm doing. And so not only that, it's just I hear from now schools, like all these, actually I get these random messages from middle schoolers and and even elementary students who are like, oh, I learned about you in school, and not just about me, but about all these stories that I'm sharing through my cookies. So it's just amazing that, oh, finally, like we are getting reinserted back into curriculum, or I don't even know, reinserted, we're being inserted
Yeah,
into curriculum finally. And so that's you think, what can cookies do? But like it's actually now at least inserting themselves into the knowledge of our new generations. I always think about my 10-year-old self when I'm creating work, and finally like they're learning. So I think it's a huge impact. um Sorry, I went kind of long with that,
oh,
but yeah.
that's great. No,
But yeah, bake therapy too, you mentioned.
yes.
Yeah, so I've always treated my cookies as art. And when I was running my business, you also probably understand, but like there's a lot of stress that comes with operating a small business, especially in terms of making the product itself. And so while managing that, like, oh gosh, there were brutal days where I was just crying, while I was working, because I was just so tired, but not getting any sleep. But what I became more aware of was how I was really re-energized in the kitchen and in the work itself. And so I started to wonder, I'm like, this is very therapeutic to me. I wonder if there's such thing as bake therapy. And I actually was like really thinking about, is there such thing as bake therapy certification? Because I would love to do that.
Yeah.
And at that time, this was now 2017, I didn't find anything other than a lot of people in agreement about how healing baking is for them. And so again, going back to how I treated my baked goods as art, I found a field that's called art therapy. And again, it's mental health service that is concentrated around art making, visual art making. And there's also a whole field of creative arts therapy that uses writing, music, dance, all of that, drama to just help people heal. You know, you think about this theory of multiple intelligences where we learn in different ways, then well, I think the same thing, that we can all heal in different ways, and that those healing modalities should be as diverse as we are as humans, you know. So yeah, and I'm now back in school studying art therapy, and trying to push these frontiers of bake therapy, specifically as a potential form of art therapy. So, again, it all comes back to the pause and the slowing down. Cooking, I think, is more, you know, like you could improvise more, it's fast, it's quick, but baking, you have to wait and you have to measure and be precise, you know. So I think we need that sometimes, like to the slowing down, and baking, you know, the reward is almost immediate. Like if you can get through that wait of 30 minutes or whatever to bake, you do see the results relatively quickly. So I think that helps too, in just personal development, even beyond mental health. So yeah.
We, we have a family tradition now. On every Saturday morning, we make pancakes.
Oh,
So
that's awesome. Yeah.
Tracy is like you and is willing to be very precise
Yeah.
and have patience and do things properly, and hers always turn out much better. And I just throw it all in, and then
Yeah.
hope that and there isn't much to throw in with pancakes, but they turn out not too bad.
Yeah.
So my family tell me. I think they're just trying to make me feel good. Uh, you mentioned TED there. TED Talks have become something huge in the world, and I remember being excited for you when I first heard that you were going to do a TED Talk. Tell us about that experience, if you can do,
Yeah.
how it came about and your actual experience of doing it, and then the response afterwards as well.
Yeah, it's funny. I've been looking through old journals of mine, and I think I discovered like a journal from 2015 or 16, and I was writing about how I wish I could be on the TED stage, and I had no idea what I would talk about, but
Yeah.
to think of that now, I'm like, oh wow, it happened, you know. But actually, Pittsburgh, you know, I talked about some of the more disheartening aspects of the city, the FBI naming it one of the hubs of white, you know, terrorism and all that. But it's also the city where Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, this very beloved children's program in America, was founded and filmed. And the whole premise of that show, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, is like kindness. Like kindness was the biggest factor, and everybody really being a community. And so there's a lot of that in Pittsburgh as well. It's a city, but there's a nice also like small town feel where people encourage one another. And so with that being said, when you know, I attended one of my first TEDx Pittsburgh events in 2000, had to be 18. So the year before I was asked, and I ran into a friend who was a former speaker as well. And she's like, oh, Jasmine, would you ever be interested in giving a TED talk? I was like, sure. And so she just connected me to the organizers, and that's kind of how it happened. And of course, the organizers don't just accept anybody who is networked in that way. But I assumed that they had then started researching into my work, because then I heard from them several months later, and they were very interested in, you know, having me as a speaker. So that's how that happened. Day of, we had a huge attendance. There's like over 900 people packed in this one of the historic theaters in Pittsburgh, and I was so nervous. And you know, this is where Taekwondo comes into play, because
Yeah.
my public speaking, you know, experience up to this point is teaching Taekwondo. You
Yeah.
know, like
Yeah.
that's probably the largest group experience I had, where I had to stand and command, you know, an audience. And so I was really trying to bring that, you know, Taekwondo background into my public speaking. And you know how my father is as well. I think listening him talk at the end of so many classes, probably, I mean, he just very naturally became my inspiration, and my role model, really. And so I was trying to channel my dad's energy as well. And what you won't see in the published TED talk is that I did blank out for like a solid 4 seconds. That felt like an
Yeah.
eternity.
Yeah.
but yeah, it happened. I Other than that 4 second, losing my mind there, it went very well. And then once it was published, the aftermath of that was very surprising because it had just published, and I was seeing 2,000, 5,000, 10,000 views, and I was like, "What is going on?" Because that's not typical. um, so yeah, I don't know how that happened, but it went viral very quickly, and that was extremely exciting as well. And I kind of touched on it earlier, where what was most surprising was hearing from people all around the world, who had seen it and connected on these universal themes of, feeling underrepresented, feeling ostracized, and all of that. And people were just, of course there were haters, but most people were really loving
Yeah,
the idea of, wow, cookies, who would have thought? So
yeah.
yeah.
You that couldn't have been planned any better, or uh, it couldn't have merged any better, because the next thing on my notes was to talk about martial arts, uh,
Uh-huh.
and I want to talk about your journey in martial arts,
Yeah.
and then obviously I want to speak about your dad, but
Yeah.
they're one and the same, obviously,
Yeah.
in many degrees. Uh, okay, general question to get sort of kicked off, or general thought. Uh, what have you taken from your martial arts experiences of being born into it, to how has that helped you? You touched on it a wee bit there, but how has it shaped the current Jasmine Cho from
Right.
being born into martial arts for that's
Yeah.
all you knew type thing?
Right. It's just interesting. I just feel like, I mean, and I know that there are other children of martial artists, but uh, I feel like I didn't have a choice.
Yeah,
That's my honest opinion. Like
yeah, yeah,
I was born into, all these like baby pictures that I see of myself. I'm in the dojang, I'm in the school, and I was just thinking about this too, how, you think about your childhood, and probably as a baby, you connect with your mother's heartbeat. But for me, that beat was my dad, beating against the Congo.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
That I just, yeah, and those are the biggest sounds of my childhood. Him hitting against that Congo on so it's like hitting against the Congo, but it's wrapped around a steel pole, so you hear like boom, like just
yeah,
reverberating throughout. And then he'd jump rope a lot, and I don't know how many he was able to do, but it would just like, when you're skipping
yeah,
jumps,
yeah,
it's like he's floating with like this brown aura, because he had like a brown leather
yeah,
jump rope, and it's like like I'd hear that a lot too of my childhood. So it's just funny how it's just, yeah, it's so much a part of what I was born into, that there's no separation, I don't think,
yeah,
as far as the martial arts and how I am. But if I were to like pinpoint out like certain things that have, affected me, just martial arts, the training itself is definitely a sense of discipline,
yeah,
and that sense of passion. um this is something new that I'm thinking of right now, but there, I mean, the martial arts for me also personally, I think was a really healthy channel of like anger and aggression. And yeah, even just like the last week, my mom was talking, just randomly told me about how, your dad, like his whole life is about exercise and physical health, and when he feels good, he'll wail on the bag, and when he feels angry, he'll wail on the bag. And like that was for me too. I think I loved having access to that, but like a channel of emotions. And this whole passion for social justice too, I think started at a young age. Again, growing up and facing these feelings of injustice toward me,
mhm,
is why that was always very prevalent in my mind. But while I was doing martial arts, there's the whole, also the non-physical side of it. We're constantly talked about how to connect with humanity, and think on a higher level. And so all of that really just came together, I think, and definitely like influenced like my entire being,
yeah,
really. So like channeling angers in healthy ways, and knowing that there is a just type of anger, that you should act upon, I think is huge. And again, like Yeah, even just the knowing how to teach and the humility of also like you're a black belt, but you're really just a white belt, constantly a lifelong, you're learning, and that idea of continuous learning is huge, huge in my life. A very, very much a core value of who I am and how I navigate the world. I'm always hungry to learn. Um, yeah, and it's just fun. And then there's like things that just don't necessarily have any meaning, not deep meaning. Like just when I think about Ryan, my partner, and like how he grew up, he knew nothing about the martial arts. And so when he came over for the holidays with our family, he's
Yeah,
just texting his family and saying, I'm sitting here with Jasmine's family watching boxing, and like, it's just like
yep, yep,
totally
yep.
different. But that was just how I grew up, and that became like a way of our family to bond as well. And so it's just totally different. I don't know, just my family culture. Yeah.
One of the things that if I ever post a video of your dad, or or you post, or there's anything at all, one of the things that always strikes me is that there's comments from every single corner of the globe. There's people in Australia, Argentina,
Yeah.
uh, you name it. At what age did you realise who your dad was? Or,
Yeah.
and what was that like? I had Philip Ramirez Jr. on the podcast,
Yeah.
and we were talking about his dad. And you, I think it's really important that we see you as being your own person as well, and I want to say that. But I think there's it's nice to know, and it's nice to reference as well that
Mhm.
you're the daughter of your father as well, and obviously your mother as well. But
Right.
when did you realise that my dad's Grandmaster Cho? Like,
Yeah. Right. I think it probably happened in stages.
okay,
So my earliest memory, I don't even I feel like, I mentioned it in my TED talk too. Like I think I saw my dad as like a superhero like status since I was very little. I don't remember how it started, but I know that I grew up watching him on TV too. Best of the best. I
yeah,
loved. I'm so sad because I used to have his Korea coach, the captain's coach, and
yeah,
I
yeah,
didn't know the value of that when I was little. But I wore that, and seeing my dad on TV, also meaning that we had a bunch of the VHS copies of his demos,
mhm,
and I'd see him demoing and breaking things and kicking and all of that. And so I just remember feeling, wow, my dad is like strong, and talking about Bruce Lee, I really meant that. I was like,
yeah,
oh, my dad could beat up Bruce Lee because like I grew up watching my dad do all this, be who he is. And so and in America, like in the elementary schools, it was common to have like a show and tell. I don't know if that's something
yeah, yeah,
practiced
yeah,
over
yeah.
there. Yeah, so I would bring those VHS tapes to show. It's like, this is my dad, like watch him, So that happened at a super young age. And then probably like one of the earlier memories I have is when we had our visitors from Ireland come over, and I met, Grandmaster Darcy and his son. And I just remember like my first interaction with everyone from Ireland is like, I felt so bad, especially with Grandmaster Darcy's son, John Jr.
Yeah.
Um, he would talk to me and I had no idea what he was saying because of the accent. So but I remember I was like, wow, there's these people flying in from Ireland, and the way that they treated my dad was just, to bear witness to that was a very powerful experience for me too, because, um, yeah, to see the people admire my dad in the same way my childhood eyes did, like, wow, my dad is awesome. And then like to see these people from a different country fly in, just to train with my dad. And like Grandmaster Darcy from a young age too would always be telling me, and Grandmaster Philip Amir is always telling me, your dad is amazing, and like kind of really reaffirming everything I already believed about my dad.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, But then, like, when I say in stages, his 80th birthday video, that still blew me away, you know, like, to see everyone coming in, like, as you said, from corners of the world. Yeah, it's just amazing. And I appreciate you saying that I'm my own person too, because I do and I did struggle with that a lot, where in some ways I was like, I felt very burdened, like as if my dad cast a huge shadow over me. Like, how will I ever outdo my dad, or like how can I ever live up to the legacy that he has built and is leaving behind, you know? So it was like part very much like an inspiration for me, but also part sometimes suffocating, like, oh my gosh, like how can I do this? But it is true that he, like, I think his influence always pulls me forward. Like, he always says keep pushing, and that's
Yeah,
definitely, yeah, a philosophy that I mean, his words just ring in my ears, you know, like keep going, keep pushing, and too late can be on time, like all his sayings, live within me, and yeah. So I think it just continues on. And actually, it's been lifelong, the realization of his impact, and me continuing to want to hopefully be a fraction of who he is, the legacy that he is. So in my own way. Yeah.
what was the training like? I see, just when you say keep pushing there, it's one of the times we were in Hawaii. Emir wasn't born at the time, and the day that we were flying home, uh, Grandmaster Darcy, Tracy, and I went for lunch, and it's two words: keep pushing. But you know, you get moments where you just have memories, you just have really fond memories. And I remember your dad and Grandmaster Darcy were going back into the dojang, surprisingly enough. uh, and we were heading back to the hotel to leave. And he just looked straight at me, and he said, keep pushing. And,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just, that's quite emotional, actually.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, so
Yeah.
just
That's-
those memories are just two words, but in those two words, I knew exactly what he was saying.
Right.
And yeah, just amazing.
Yeah.
So anyway, once I've composed myself, let's talk about the training. What was it like actually being these classes and you being around the dojang so often and doing his class? And were you pushed harder than anybody else, or?
I suspect my brother was. I
Yeah,
think he
yeah,
took it I think he definitely took it way easier on me, being the daughter. Not to, I mean, he is he's of a different generation, so he was a bit more protective over me in some sense, I think. And he yeah, he was definitely harder on my brother. I think he wanted my brother to train really hard, and be really good in fighting, and all of that, whereas for me, I think he was like, it's okay, you don't have to, like, do it too hard, like, don't be too crazy with this.
yeah.
But I mean, it was still important that I was in every class. That was like my baseline. So I don't think I was pushed to train harder than, and again, if you knew my dad since back in the day, he would push everybody really hard, and he still does, actually. It's just crazy to witness him, like when he's doing like the shuffle axe kicks, and he's like literally gliding over the floor, and the rest of us are just out of breath. And so that kind of training, I think, has always been consistent as far as pushing everybody pretty hard. But I do know that I think he pushed my brother a bit extra hard than he did with me. So
I,
yeah.
I, another memory of just how he's I can't quantify it sometimes, because you say things, and you try and explain to people, and maybe they don't fully, or you don't do, or I don't do a good enough job of expressing it. I know for a fact that Grandmaster Ramirez and Grandmaster Darcy have spoken about this, and if they feel this, my God, do I feel it? Anytime I've been in a seminar or in headquarters at Hawaii, you genuinely, in his presence, feel like a white belt. You genuinely do. That's not because he's making you feel, well, he is making you feel that way because of what he's like. But I still wish, and I'm going to put you in the spot here and ask when the book's coming, because I still wish that we could share more of him and just get more of him out there in the world, because there's generations coming through that me telling stories just can't quite express what your dad's like.
Right.
I don't think we can quantify that. I really don't. And it's just in our memories that we can remember. Even COVID took away 2020. And when I was thinking about chatting with you today, I'm thinking, oh, I saw Jasmine in Hawaii, but I forgot that was a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
Is the full year. But just seeing him, and he was 79 at that stage when we were last in Hawaii. Just the way he still throws and kicks and works out, it's quite extraordinary. It really is.
And really it is because he lives it every single day. I mean, there is no way he could be the way he is if he didn't. I mean, so it is truly a testament to how much, not only, I mean, he loves Taekwondo. I mean, that is his true love. Like, he's at the dojang every single day, and he feels really lethargic if he's unable to train, and I mean, yeah, again, reminding people that he is 80 now, and so his body definitely feels it. But I mean, I think he's still well above like average as far as his physical strength, stamina, and all of that. But yeah, I have all these random memories too. Like, this was when I was living in Hawaii with him, and he was feeling really down, and he like, we were in the office, and he was kind of like leaning against the door, and he's like, I'm not as young anymore. Like, all I did was like only 1,000 roundhouse kicks each leg. I'm like, Dad, like, that's so much, It's like, that is not normal, that's still a lot. Yeah, so yeah, it's his consistency, his love, and his discipline of just making sure that he's training every single day, and being that living example, truly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've never met anyone to this day, and who you spoke about him giving speeches at the end of classes and seminars and gradings. I remember phoning him up once about something and feeling really down about it, and then he has such a way of, your dad has said no to me in the past. This isn't about it being a yes, but I've never had someone tell me no and make me leave the conversation feeling as good about myself as what your dad can do. But I've never met anyone who has the ability to make you feel as good about yourself ever in any sort of walk of life, or especially in the martial arts. Just someone who is able to just touch so many people throughout the world is what Grandmaster Cho did. I was going to say did, but still does. Obviously, still does. Yeah, quite a unique individual. What was your favourite? Give me. I'm really wary of missing this opportunity with you, Jasmine. So, and give me, if you can, a couple of your favourite memories of growing up in Taekwondo with your dad, if you can. If you can pick it, if you can pick just a couple.
Yeah. There's like just silly memory, like there's silly memories of like being in middle school. That's when your eyes start opening to love interests, and I learned later on, after actually, that there were several boys who were interested in me, and they'd try to call me, and it was at the dojang, and so my dad would be like, Grandmaster Cho, like, just Taekwondo, and so it totally scared them off, like, so there's silly memories like that. I remember when my dad was, you know, when jujitsu was coming onto the scene, and he would practice with me. And it was just like, it was so funny. Like, we had fun doing that. He'd be like, wait, let me see if I could put you in a kimura or whatever. And then he like hold on with like to my arm with his hands. He'd be like, oh my gosh, like you're so tiny, I could break you. Or like, and it's just like, just there's no like real meaning to them, but it's little moments like that that I grew up, that stick in my memory,
Yeah.
about him. Specific to Taekwondo, gosh, I mean, yeah, I don't know. There's just like those kinds of things. I would say another huge one that actually I feel like it was for me. It's weird to say that it was a spiritual awakening for me, but I remember this was when my dad was maybe 65 or 60. He was either almost 60 or something like that. And it was, it's been a while since he had done a demo, and this was going to be in Pittsburgh,
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah.
It was East Coast seminar, yeah. And I was really worried for him, but you see now, I published some of the training videos he did. The way he trained was he just practiced multiple times, throwing boards in the air and practice spinning kicks and all of that. But as his daughter, I was just worried about his safety. And in my mind at that time, I was probably in high school. I'm like, oh, my dad is older, and I was just worried about him. And so I remember praying a lot, like, please don't let it get hurt, and all of this. And then you see him enter into the whole, gymnasium where it was at, and like he's just axe kicks past his head, and just he did an amazing demonstration, just no mistakes, just boom, boom. And that for me, I was like, oh my God, like I was just so thankful. I felt like, because I was praying so hard, I was like, oh God, thank you so much for keeping my dad safe. And he killed it on the floor there. And so that's another huge memory, to be able to witness that, and as well in person, after that might have been my first, yeah, that was my first and only time really of seeing my dad demonstrate, because I grew up with watching everything on video,
Yeah.
and when I was a student, it was the students that were doing most of the demonstrations. So yeah, I just realized that, yeah, that was the one and only where I really saw him in person demonstrating.
It was yourself that uploaded that, but that video footage is on YouTube, so
Yes.
everybody should go and
Yeah.
check that out. There's a wonderful, again, you know these things, or I know these things because I've watched that footage a million times,
Yeah.
over and over and over. And there's a wonderful little bit that even you might not even have picked up. Master Byrne from Ireland, uh, Grandmaster, he does a blindfolded spinning heel kick,
Uh-huh.
and it's 3 separate boards.
Yes.
So
Uh-huh.
on a technical level, if you're breaking 3 boards that are together,
Mhm.
it's actually easier than doing it the way your dad did it, which was having a space between,
Mhm.
because it means that the arc of the spinning heel kick has to be wider.
Right. Uh-huh.
And he was blindfolded at the time. So there's a lovely little point, because Master Byrne is in the middle holding the board. And when your dad goes through the boards, and then goes to do his next break, Master Byrne just stands there shaking his head. Like, if you watch the video, his hands come up just very quickly, and he's shaking his head, thinking, "I know he was the closest person to your dad during that, and even
Yeah.
he couldn't believe the precision and the power and the speed and just
Yeah.
everything that he was." You should go back and look for that,
Yeah,
because
I will now for
yeah,
sure.
you just see him standing, just shaking his head. Uh,
Yeah.
okay, coming back to you just before we finish up,
Mhm.
the as I said at the beginning of the episode, any time I see you on social media, I just think, when does this girl sleep? For a start, what's coming up now? What's the future plans for you?
Oh, yeah. It's so right
Where are you
now I
taking
am
into it?
actually working on a book proposal, but it's for my work, so that's been consuming a lot. I am actually, still actively in my master's program right now, although it's mostly remote. So that's consuming a lot of my time. I just started off a whole series of events called Kidsburg Cookie Table, and we have another one coming up this weekend. So preparing for that. I've got a few speaking engagements lined up. So there's a lot of little things, like short-term things and long-term things in the process. But one secret I will share is I don't think I'm as busy as people believe me to be, but I've learned to create some space for myself because I'm very much an introvert by nature actually, and so I can get sucked out of my energy quite easily. So I try to protect some of my days for just not doing anything, and
Brilliant.
it's not because I'm busy doing something, it's actually so I have some time, to spend with Ryan too. Like
Yeah, of
people
course.
need to, yeah, spend time with their loved ones and do that. So that's the secret behind how I'm actually not very busy. But
You just mentioned there, and I actually forgot that. Just so we can, let's squeeze this in. You actually did produce a children's book, which is available as well.
oh, right, yes,
Yes, I
yes.
completely forgot to mention that.
Yeah,
So
yeah, it's available on Amazon. I don't know if you can get it everywhere around the world, but it is on Amazon, called Role Models Who Look Like Me. That was a project that came about while I was in undergraduate school studying art therapy. And basically, the book I'm hoping to put out in the near future is a cookie version of, something like that. But the book I'm working on right now is a little bit broader, but
okay,
it's still along the same lines of representation and history and all of that. So
brilliant, brilliant. Okay, very quickly, just before we finish, Jasmine, give us your website and your social media handles so that people can go and check
yeah,
all of this out.
yeah, everything is pretty much under my full name, which is Jasmine M as in Min Cho. That's my middle name. It's jasminemcho.com is my website. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, they're all Jasmine M Cho. So
Brilliant,
find
brilliant.
me there.
Jasmine, this has been an absolute treat. As I say, I was so chuffed that we could do it so quickly because when I first asked you, I'm thinking it'll be weeks or months down the line, but the fact that we could turn this around so quickly. Uh, Listen, God bless you, Jasmine. I've really enjoyed this,
Likewise. Thank
and
you so much again.
just keep being inspirational. Keep doing what you're doing. Yeah, brilliant,
Thank
amazing.
you. Thank
Okay,
you so much. All
right.
right.
Okay,
Wish you
Jasmine. God
well
bless
to
you.
your whole family.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, and to yours. Right, take care, Jasmine. God
Okay,
bless.
bye-bye.
Bye. 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 Bye.